Another thing that will help you maintain a discipline are confidants. Partners who you can talk to where there are no competing stakes. Different than allies. Allies will frequently be within the organization or political system. You need them because, together you're much stronger than separate. And they can also help you develop your point of view to be enriched by their point of view. But an ally if the two of you are allies, one of the strengths of that ally is that they also bring another constituency. So that when the two of you speak from two different constituencies rather than one, you can get other people a little bit more likely that people will engage that point of view. Leadership becomes more dangerous if you're isolated. Because the easiest way for people to neutralize your point of view is to neutralize you, particularly if you're representing a challenging set of questions. But this ally cannot always be true to you because the ally also has to honor their loyalty to their own constituency, their own division. So we also need confidants, people who are outside the system. And our hope is that you will discover people with whom, and maybe some of you with each other, can be confidants with each other, where you can spill out the story without having to be a clean machine, not worried that anybody could misuse the information, because they don't care about the issue. They're out here. So they can just listen to you and help you sort out what really matters to you, what risks are you ready to take, does it matter that much to you, what losses are you willing to sustain, to reorient you when you're hurt and you want to go in there and act outraged and, but that's the wrong move. You need confidants to help you manage what you call your ego. You can't do it by yourself. You can't lead alone. One way to understand mobilizing multi-party learning, adaptive work in a system, a social system, is that you're trying to create holding environments or contexts, structures in which public learning is permissible, it's possible, where people can learn from each other, where there's an engagement that's difficult, sometimes very high pressures, but where learning can take place in a public space. And you're going to have very rich opportunities now to experience again, but as adults, public learning in lots of different contexts. And if you really make good use of your time ahead, you will be able to step back on the balcony and look at how does the course design and the implementation of that course design by the faculty, how does it either promote or inhibit public learning? How does it regulate the disequilibrium, the level of confusion or chaos or disorder? Does it keep the pressure cooker so cool that nothing cooks, that nothing gets below the skin? Or does it heat it up too much? How is that structure being designed and then managed to promote in a tolerable range of stress learning without dropping to this level or in most structures tend to run so cool, when they begin to learn, people get frightened, they go back here. Most organizations are allergic to conflict. But conflict is one of the engines of innovation. People don't learn by staring in the mirror. They learn by engaging a different point of view. So you could learn a lot about how you in your own leadership afterwards, how you can orchestrate public learning from how it's done well or not well, in all your courses. Each is a little laboratory for you to learn from. If you step back and observe, how's this person operating this particular submarine, this particular airplane? How are they doing it? One of the ways you stay in the game through the despair is to free yourself from the myth of measurement. Measurement is a profoundly powerful tool. You're going to study lots of things. You've already studied lots of things in which you use measurement. You can't run an organization without measuring things. You can't locate the progress you're making in a school or in a clinic, a hospital, without measuring things. We save lives in medicine because we can measure lots of things internal to the body. But measurement is a tool. It doesn't capture all truth. You can't actually measure good. This came home to me years ago when my children were little. We have a holiday here which you will experience in October called Halloween. And on Halloween, the children get into costumes and they go into the neighborhoods and they collect candy. Years ago, when my children were little, my parents came to visit, and it happened to be during the holiday of Halloween. My father was one of the great brain surgeons of his time. He invented many of the instruments that are used in neurosurgery. So in his lifetime, he saved thousands of people's lives, some of them with his own hands, some of them indirectly through the instruments that he developed. When he retired from medicine, he went back to a childhood hobby. He always loved looking at the stars. And he thought he would like to introduce his grandchildren to the heavens. So he went out and bought all the astronomy books he could find to introduce his grandchildren. And he said to himself, I don't like any of these books, so I'm going to write my own. So he wrote an astronomy book, and he sent it off to a publisher of astronomy books, Cambridge University Press. They said, this is pretty good. We're going to match you with a great illustrator, and we're going to publish it. It's called A Walk Through the Heavens, Cambridge University Press, $12.95. He also wrote one for the Southern Hemisphere. So he happened to publish that first book, A Walk Through the Heavens, just before Halloween. And on that Halloween, we invited a young man to our house to come with us into the neighborhood with the children. This young man, his name is Rick Stemple. He used to live with us when he was a student. Now it was several years later, and he was a school teacher. We had a really nice evening, out in the neighborhood with the children. And at the end of the evening, he came back to the house. My parents were there. And I thought, Rick is a school teacher. I'm going to give him a copy of my father's astronomy book. So I brought a copy of the book up. Rick looks at the book. My children are standing there. And he opens it up, and he notices that the book is dedicated to all the grandchildren, including my two. He then closes the book. He turns to my father and asks my father if he could borrow a pen. My father reaches into his pocket, he pulls out a pen, he starts smiling, and he expects Rick to ask him to sign the book. But that's not what Rick does. Rick gets down on his knee, He opens the book to the dedication page, and he asks my two children to sign the book. So in 1-inch scrawl, diagonally across the page, my children sign their names. And as they're signing their names, I turn and look up to my father. I was a little taller than my father, but I always looked up to my father, wondering, what's he feeling? And I see just the beginning of tears in his eyes. And I realize 40 years of saving lives could not be measured against the meaning of that moment. I don't think any of us, when we die and pass on and visit with the angels, are going to be asked, how come you created 17 jobs and not 38? How come you stopped one war and not 2? How come you saved 7,500 lives and not 8,612? Why did you teach 600 children and not 750? You can't measure good. If you turn the lights on behind one child's eyes, can you measure that? It says in my tradition, which is shared by many of your traditions, you save one life, you save the world. I think you stay in the game, maintaining the patience, tolerating the moments of despair, by staying in touch with the good that you're doing, the meaning of the good that you're doing that's beyond any measure. And by giving yourself permission to take pleasure and heart and joy in the fruits of your own labor. And all of you have already done a lot of good in the world. You've touched lives. You've turned on the lights someplace with somebody or many people. And I think in staying alive in your spirit, you have to let yourself reconnect with all of that good that you have done already. I mean, you get to quit and go to heaven. If you only look at all that's left undone, you're more at risk of burning out. I think it's really important to rejoice in the fruits of your labor. And one of the ways you can help each other over time ahead is to remind each other, because we forget quickly. And that would be my prayer for all of you. May you help each other take pleasure, gain joy from the fruits of your labor. Take care of each other. And the reason why we're going to anchor our concept of leadership in the work to be done, the problem to be solved, the challenges to be met, is because if we were only to focus on the hands that it takes, the personal abilities, we would begin to quickly discover that these physical or personal abilities are nonspecific. You can have phenomenal analytical capacity and a lot of knowledge about the human body. But, are you a cardiologist? Are you a pathologist? Are you doing research? There are a lot of different things you could be doing with those same hands and those same tools. So when people start the conversation about leadership by focusing on, here are the personal capacities, this is what it means to become a leader, to be a leader, independent of the challenge we're facing, it very quickly becomes in psychology we would call it a Rorschach test or a projection, where people begin to project into this all of their favorite qualities. Whether or not they're really relevant to meet these challenges, that's untested. Similarly, people tend to define leadership in terms of the powers, the tools of power and influence, authority, persuasion, charisma. But one could have all of those tools and not practice any leadership. Those tools are useful in lots of walks of life. Here's another example. One would say that to practice leadership, it requires courage. It requires a stomach for conflict. It requires a stomach for ambiguity. It requires the ability to listen. It requires the ability to relate with people. Well, all of that's important if you're raising teenage children. You know, to raise a teenager, you've got to have courage. You have to have a tolerance for conflict. You have to have a tolerance for uncertainty, because you just pray that it's going to turn out. You've got to be able to listen. You have to be able to relate with this creature who you used to know, but what's happened? And in fact, those same abilities are useful in lots of different walks of life. There are many, many walks of life where those abilities are relevant. So to say these are the defining characteristics of a leader ends up being actually quite misguided. And there have been, in fact, thousands of studies to try to define, here are the key characteristics. Nobody's ever come up with, here are the key characteristics. Indeed, when they even do those studies, they first select, who are we going to look at to define the characteristics. They usually start with people who have the tools, people who are in positions of power or authority. And then now let's look at how what has it taken for them to gain those tools? All of it's disoriented from the work to be done, the challenge to be met, the house to be built. So that's where we're going to anchor our understanding of leadership, is in the work to be done. What are we trying to build here, in our little house? What kind of house is it? So what makes a problem situation technical is not its complexity or its importance, but the degree to which the challenge already lies within our capacity to solve. This was not always so for these problems. Today's expertise developed over time. Consider how surgeons around the world today save lives performing highly complicated technical heart surgeries that were probably unthinkable several decades ago. Today's technical problems were yesterday's adaptive challenges. They consisted of gaps that challenged us to develop new capacity. Technical problems, when we face them, are ready to be solved. Even if we can't solve them ourselves, we can turn to others in our group or community with the right know-how, ability, and with the powers to come up with solutions and motivate people to carry them out. If that sounds familiar, it is because this work sounds a lot like the work of leadership as seen in our common view. But if you think about the technical problems we face, for which there are people in our community who already have the needed know-how, I think you'll see that these are situations where we don't really need leadership. When we turn to others to solve problems we know they can solve by leveraging their current expert capacity, we're not really asking these people to lead. We're really asking them to do their job. What we're really asking people to do in these situations is to provide authoritative and sometimes managerial expertise. Leadership is critically important in our lives because we do face challenges. We face challenges at every level of our lives, from families to small businesses, from schools to school districts, from towns to cities, and from states to nations, and to the complex network we call the international community. So we start here because we are going to anchor our understanding of leadership not in personal abilities, although these are important, and not in the tools and instruments you would use for practicing leadership, although these are invaluable too. We're going to anchor our understanding of leadership in the work to be done to meet tough challenges. How do you mobilize people to get important work done? As we do so, we will explore the personal abilities one needs, like the capacity to be trustworthy, to maintain one's poise, to stomach conflict, and to communicate and listen well. And we will also explore how to use different kinds of power skillfully and wisely, the tools of influence, persuasion, inspiration, and authority. But we don't start there because, as key as these abilities and tools may be, I think you can see from life around you that these abilities and tools are not specific to leadership or to any single realm of life. They aren't defining. They are important in many realms of life, from parenting to selling goods, from running a store to practicing law or medicine. In a sense, I'm asking you to think of leadership like the craft of carpentry, where you may need good hands and good tools, but good hands and good tools don't define carpentry. Building something does. With the same good hands and tools, you might be an artist making sculpture, or a cabinet maker making fine furniture. The hands and tools don't define the craft, the challenges do. It's the challenges of the work that define the craft, from building a house to meet specific needs, to sculpting and crafting in wood and metal to realize a particular vision. After decades of teaching and consulting around the world, I think the most common source of confusion about leadership is this one. Many people see leadership as a set of abilities and tools, and therefore they become disoriented in their thinking. They lose the compass heading provided by the challenges to be met and the work to be done to get somewhere. In this course, we will explore the abilities and tools of leadership practice, but first we need to anchor leadership in the work of leadership itself, the practice of mobilizing people to meet tough challenges. Early in my career, I used to run emergency rooms in the hospital. And I'd have to coordinate, the team, particularly in emergency settings where some person or maybe a group of people would all come into the hospital at the same time after a car accident. And you'd have to coordinate the team, hold the head steady, get the IV in, put on the electrodes to measure the status of their heart, and so forth. You'd coordinate the team. I don't think that required leadership on my part. I think it required some managerial expertise, a fair amount of authoritative expertise. Mainly, I was just doing my job. I was doing what I was trained to do, what I had learned how to do. And basically, I was deploying a set of state-of-the-art routines, applying knowledge that had already been developed to treat that situation. You don't need leadership if you're just doing what you know how to do already. Now again, that doesn't make leadership more important. There's nothing more important than saving a life. The fact that we've developed the capacity and the know-how to save a life and make it routine, that is just valuable beyond any measure.